Okay, I've started the recording. Rachel's back.
I'm assuming there is an answer.
I said Rachel's back, so we can start now. So I'm Jerry Condon. I'm a member of the coordinating committee of our Veterans for Peace Nuclear Abolition Working Group. For those of you who are new to us, this working group has been kind of reactivated about a year ago, and we've actually been meeting bi-weekly, which is every 2 weeks for the last year. And we've on the first meeting of the month, which is now on the second Friday, which is today, we typically have a guest speaker, and we have a wonderful guest speaker today, physicist Theodore Ted Postol. He's a professor emeritus at MIT and former, believe it or not, former senior advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations on nuclear weapons issues and policy. Ted has courageously stood up to the U.S. government and the mainstream media on several occasions, challenging false reporting on the wars in Iraq and Syria. And I heard him in a recent webinar with Ray McGovern and John Mearsheimer. And by the way, Ted, Ray was our guest speaker last month. Ted was expressing grave concern that if the war in Ukraine escalates further, it could become a nuclear war. So that's what he's going to be sharing with us today in more detail. So if you want to say anything more about self-introduction, Ted, please feel free. And thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward. I know you're going to speak for 20 minutes, possibly a little more. And then we're going to have 20 minutes of Q&A and discussion. So we're really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I would just like to thank you all for your service to the country. I apologize for my seminar is going to be choppy because I didn't have much time to prepare it. It doesn't, hopefully it won't be useless. Choppy doesn't necessarily mean useless.
Yeah, we invited him yesterday.
What? Yeah.
Okay, we invited him yesterday. So.
Yeah, and I've been involved all day working with people on another project related to the potential for an accidental nuclear war. So I've been, I've hardly had a chance to have any uninterrupted time to put together some slides. So if I say anything that's completely incomprehensible, which may be the case, I invite you to interrupt me or make sure that you ask me a question during the question and answer period. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to share some slides with you.
I'm at a Zoom meeting.
You have to give me screen sharing, I think.
Share screen, okay. And can I try to do that now? How do I give you the screen? Alan, so do I go to put him Ted as participant and put?
Okay, yeah, I got to meet him tomorrow.
Okay.
Could everybody mute yourselves except for Ted and Jerry?
So I'm sharing screen. And how do I share screen specifically with Ted?
If you click on share screen, does it give you the option of allowing others, or it under?
It says one participant at a time or multiple participants can share simultaneously. I'll just hit multiple participants and hope for the best here.
Okay, so I'm hitting my share screen. I got it. So that's good. And can you see my slide? The first.
No, I think that's Jerry's slide.
That's me right now, yeah.
Y advances in.
So you have to go out, Jerry. Close your screen. Up at the top, it says.
Jerry, did you assign Ted as a co-host?
Share.
That will give you.
Okay, here we go.
apparently, Rachel, it's not possible to make co-hosts the way they've got it set up.
But there's Ted's slide. You all can see it?
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, then we're ready to go. You can see the cursor moving around too.
Yes.
All right, great. What I'm going to try to talk about today is what I consider to be the grave danger of accidental nuclear war that we're now facing. The important point to keep in mind is that there are an uncountable and infinite number of possibilities that could lead to an action and reaction cycle that could lead to escalation and a nuclear exchange that would destroy civilization as we know it. So when I give you some examples here, it is very important for you to understand that these are just picked out from some, guesses or some experiences I know we have had. But this does not mean that this is in any way it's pointing to the real potential here. The potential can be from anywhere. One of the points I'd like to make immediately, though, is that it's extremely important that everybody who thinks about this subject, who's interested, understand that if something happens at a very low level, it does not mean that everybody has the information they need to make competent decisions. Let me give you just some simple examples that I hope will make the point. When the World Trade Center was attacked on September 11th, no one knew what was happening. Not the president, not the chiefs of staff, not the air traffic control system. Nobody had any idea what was happening. Now, I'd like to point out, although it was a horrific attack in terms of its consequences, it was nothing close to what might have occurred if a single nuclear weapon went off somewhere in the country. And even in the conditions where this attack occurred basically in downtown New York, none of the communication systems were dead, were destroyed. None of the systems that we typically use were overloaded. Television was operating. We had a complete we had no understanding of what was happening. I was in Washington preparing to give a talk that evening. I remember watching this literally in real time as it happened. And we grounded all of the aircraft over the United States because we didn't know if there were 100 aircraft that were involved, that would be involved in the attack, or 2 or none. We had no idea what was happening for many, many hours. And in fact, in the days and weeks afterward, we know that in the White House, there were great fears that Osama bin Laden had a nuclear weapon and that he might actually use it. Of course, these fears were based on no knowledge at all. But that's important that they thought that, because here's a guy whose technology really was to run, get fanatics to run a plane into the trade centers, and to poison goats in a tent with cyanide. And we were worried that this guy had a nuclear weapon and was going to attack us. The point is not that it's silly. The point is that you really have no idea what is happening when something big happens. And I emphasize this because there is this underlying misunderstanding that people have about some of these incidents that I'll talk about potential incidents that I'm talking about, that people somehow have, total situational awareness. In fact, they have no situational awareness. Things are happening too fast. There are too many relevant and irrelevant pieces of information, even if they're accessible. And that is where the great danger comes from, the complete lack of understanding of what is evolving around you when you're in a position where you believe, right or wrong, you have to make a decision. So this is extremely important to keep in mind. What I want to do from the beginning here is to give you some sense of how serious the consequences of a rapid escalation could be. I don't want to dwell on this, but I want to go through this in enough detail that people have begin to have a sense of what we're talking about. What I'm showing you here is an image of the Pentagon. Probably everyone here knows it. And the inner circle here shows the accuracy.
Hello?
I'm sorry. Oh. The inner circle here shows the accuracy
I'm listening to a
of
lecture by
a
Ted Postol.
of a Trident II nuclear ballistic missile. Now, the reason this is relevant is because the Trident II is the most accurate nuclear weapon in the American arsenal that's delivered by ballistic missile. Trident operates at sea, the large ocean areas where it hides, and it has this killing power that is far greater than the killing power of any of our or Russia's ICBMs. Now, the fact that this missile is so potentially dangerous from the Russian point of view is that it has the combination of accuracy and yield to use only a small number of Trident warheads to essentially destroy the entire land-based retaliatory forces of Russia, ICBM forces. So this poses a major, major threat from the point of view of, shall we call it, nuclear warfighting. Now, nuclear warfighting is an oxymoron. Anyone who gets into a nuclear war is going to be dead, along with anyone else they fight. But the fact of the matter is that the United States could never have developed a system with this kind of accuracy if we weren't at some level thinking about maybe fighting a nuclear war. The Russians have not missed this. This is a big item on the screen of military planners in Russia, and they are very concerned about the potential for a Trident II attack against Russian strategic nuclear forces. Now, this picture here is a picture of Nagasaki prior to the atomic bombing in 1946. And the distances here are small, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet. And this is what this area looked like after the attack occurred. Now, I've labeled these circles with an unusual label. In this circle here, if you were at this range, the fireball from the Nagasaki detonation would appear 20,000 times as bright as the desert sun at noon. So it would burn you to a crisp. You would be literally charcoal. At 2,000 feet, it's 5,000 times higher. And at 3,000 feet, it's 2,000 times higher. And this emphasizes the fact that the most dangerous part of a nuclear weapon is the extraordinary temperature of the fireball, not the blast. Most people think, oh, the blast wave is terrible. It is. It's very destructive. But the real destructive feature of a nuclear weapon is you should think of it as like a little piece of the sun that has been brought down to the earth and allowed to radiate its energy for a few seconds or fractions of seconds of time. Since it's so hot and so much light and heat is radiating from it, it sets things on fires at great distances. This is what this is one of the real destructive concerns from a nuclear weapon. So if you think blast is the big issue, you're wrong. And in fact, the Federal Emergency Management Administration was wrong about this for decades. And anyway, just to give you a feel for the scale of consequence for a single Russian nuclear warhead, one of maybe 2,000 one of maybe 1,000 of land-based ICBMs that we would be trying to destroy if we attacked it first. This is what a particular warhead, an 800 kiloton warhead, about a little bit more than half of the warheads on their ICBMs are 800 kilotons or so. And this shows you roughly the altitude. Seems counterintuitive that it would be detonated at such a high altitude. It seems so high over what's called the ground zero, the area that you want to do highest damage to. Now, when the weapon is detonated, it creates a fireball. What happens is the nuclear weapon generates an enormous amount of energy in a very short period of time and in a very small volume of space. You're talking about so much energy within a few cubic feet, because the initial weapon is just releasing the energy, that the internal energy inside the nuclear weapon reaches 100 million degrees Kelvin. That's about 5 times hotter than the center of the sun. Now, what happens in about you're seeing this thing is about 1 second after the initial detonation. X-rays from the super hot weapon immediately pour out into the surrounding air, and they heat the surrounding air to fantastic temperatures, maybe a few million degrees. So which is a lot of, I mean, it's not 100 million, but it's very high. And this very superheated air starts expanding out like a fast-moving piston, and it moves out against the surrounding air, causing the surrounding air to pile up into a shock wave of enormous extent. So that's initial. So around this fireball, you have a highly compressed shell of air at this point. Notice that I have intentionally obscured the ground. And this was an intentional illustration on my part, because below this fireball, the ground would be exploding. I mean, literally exploding from the light and heat from the fireball, which is so immense that concrete would literally explode into dust, because the heating would be so high that one part of the fireball would be, one part of the surface of the concrete would be so hot relative to the part underneath that it would just shatter from explosive effects. So this would be, so the ground would be filled with these clouds of debris, evaporating asphalt from the streets, dust from rocks and concrete being just blown apart by the superheating. So the fireball has not yet, the shock wave has not yet hit the ground. So after a very long time for this yield of weapon, notice it's 30 or 40 seconds. The first one was at 1 second. So this is a long time. Nobody, of course, in this area would be aware of what's going on, because everyone would be dead. But basically, within 30 or 40 seconds, you would see a tremendous amount of dust kicked up by the propagating shock wave. So now the shock wave has left the fireball. It's propagating along. There's a reflected shock on the ground. The primary shock combines with the reflected shock, and you have fantastic amounts of blast damage, which are almost irrelevant, because the superheated air, superheated light from the fireball has already destroyed everything that matters on the ground, that's reachable on the ground. So basically, what happens afterwards, here's the initial fireball, it becomes a very hot region of air that buoyantly rises, and in the process of buoyantly rising, it tends to flatten out, because it's rising into air that is basically not moving. So the air that it's not moving causes friction at the edge, and you see this rotating effect, and you see these kinds of things. You can see this kind of fireball when people ignite a fuel air explosive or a dust explosion, where a large volume of air gets movies are big on this. They like to show you this kind of explosion. But this is on a vast scale, many miles in length, and the winds, the after winds, because this thing is sucking air in it behind it, are 200, 300 miles per hour. Very, very. So at certain ranges from the detonation point, if you looked on the ground, you would expect to see, let's say if there were poles, light poles or something that had been blown out, you'd actually find them pointing in, because the wind from the fireball rising afterwards would be so intense it would suck enormous amounts of debris into the area. So this single weapon would create an area that looks roughly this size. So we're talking about several miles, 4 or 5 miles in radius, all on fire. A zone of fantastic. If any of you are aware of the details of what happened in the firestorms in Germany and Tokyo, Japan, during World War II, this would be a far more intense firestorm for reasons I won't discuss here. But the area, the physical size of the fire, of the burning area, increases the intensity of the firestorm. Think of it as a fireplace that when it burns more violently, or when the fire is bigger, the air that gets sucked in, the rate of air getting sucked in is higher. Although the air is coming in at a higher rate, the temperature inside is even higher. And so the net result is, if the zone is bigger, the internal area is even more hot and destructive. So in Germany, we have experience from this. People were literally incinerated on the streets. Okay, so this is one nuclear weapon out of thousands. I'm not trying to say this is what would happen. I'm just trying to show you the potential consequences on a very small scale relative to the kinds of things that could be much larger. And if we talk about an uncontrolled escalation, would in fact be almost certainly much larger, involving hundreds. And I think my own guess, it's a guess, is thousands of nuclear weapons, essentially destroying civilization as we know it. So that's what's at stake. And this is all due to people making decisions that start an action-reaction cycle that nobody knows how to control, because nobody has the information and understanding of the situation and the communications capability to stop what's going on. I can't say what it would be. Hopefully, we'll never see it. If we ever see it, none of us are going to be around to study it, because we won't know what happened. No one will know what happened, because everything will have been destroyed. But certainly one of the features that we can talk about, features of our warning system, is that Russia and the United States have both built warning systems against long-range nuclear missile attack. And the United States has done the best that can be done. It's not adequate. I'm not suggesting it's adequate, but it's the best that can be done. And the United States can see the launch of Russian ballistic missiles in Russia with satellites we have deep in space. These satellites are in what's called geosynchronous orbits. I'll show you what a geosynchronous orbit is later. But they can look down at the Earth and see the bright plume of the rockets while they're in powered flight. The rockets typically take 3 to 5 minutes of powered flight. And we would know almost at launch that these rockets were in flight, because our systems are that good. And we would be sending out information to our military leadership that an attack is underway. Now, the president wouldn't necessarily know, because the military leadership would have to look at the data and decide whether or not the data is real, because false alarms do occur. And who knows how long they would take. Typically, people think 5 or 6 minutes or whatever, who knows. Then we would have about 20 minutes. We could not see the warheads when they're drifting through space. We only see the rockets when their rocket motors are burning. We would then not see them for 20 minutes, but roughly 20 minutes after they're in free flight, so 25 minutes after they're launched, they would start breaking the radar screen of our early warning radars. We have these giant early warning radars that can look out into space and see the warheads coming. Once those warheads are observed by the radar, it takes a few minutes to get enough tracking information to have an estimate of where they're going to actually land. And the estimates are very rough. But they tell us if it's, if hundreds are coming toward the middle of the United States, to the coasts, everywhere, so that we will have that information 9 to 15 minutes before their impact. And then they would impact. And most people who worry about nuclear warfighting, this may assume that a very large number of these warheads would be aimed at the Minuteman ballistic missiles in the Midwest of the United States. The objective would be to try to destroy these missiles while they're still in their launch silos. Now, of course, that's a big gamble because we would see them coming for 30 minutes and we can launch these rockets within minutes. We need a presidential decision, but they could be launched rapidly. If I were advising a president during one of these horrifying scenarios, if I were, and believe me, I wouldn't be, it'd be some political person who's worried more about what the Republicans are going to say than what's actually happening. And I can back that up with data. But if you have a really knowledgeable person there, what they would tell the president is, who cares about the ICBMs? If we need to retaliate, we have submarines that will destroy the Soviet Union or Russia in this case, many times over. We don't know this attack is real. There are all kinds of complicated communication systems involved. My advice to you, Mr. President or Ms. President, don't do anything because there will be no ambiguity if this is a real attack, and there will be no problem retaliating. That would be my advice. But I doubt a president would get that advice. Certainly when I was in the Pentagon, that was not the advice that was given the president. The president was told in briefings, I saw some of those briefings, how much time they had to launch the ICBMs. Even though we had bombers and submarines that could end Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, and there was no need to launch on such a short timeline. But in any case, well, if you think this timeline is short, you want to see what the Russians are facing. The Russians are facing a more capable anti-ICBM threat than we are facing from Russian ICBMs, because our submarines at sea are more accurate with their high yield warheads, and thereby have much greater capability to destroy Russian ICBMs in their missile silos. So let's look at some of the timelines. Here's a radar that's forward based, and if it's launched on a slightly depressed trajectory at long range from the North Atlantic from a Trident submarine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. If it's a launch from a longer range, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 minutes. That is not enough time to let me see if I have, I'm sorry. That is not enough time to make a decision. Let me just give you, I'm sorry to do this because like I said, this page here. Here is what a decision-making timeline might look like. Remember, these are technologies. They don't work instantly. So in this case, we know the missiles are launched within 1 minute, probably less for us, not for the Russians. They don't know the missile is launched until it breaks their radar horizon, because their satellite systems cannot see the ocean areas from which Trident operates. So they don't know they're under attack until their radars tell them. And their radars are line of sight, as I'll show you. Takes some time to characterize what you're seeing, whether it's from satellites or not, another minute. You need a military conference to determine what's happening, what kind of response you're going to have. So you see, I've already used up 4 or 5 minutes, and that's a very generous number, because then you're going to decide how to respond. So you're talking 6 or 8 minutes just to decide, know you're under attack and decide how to respond. So I would say, if you have 6 or 8 or 10 minutes warning time, you don't have the time to make any kind of decision. So the only thing you can do if you're Russia is to have a system of pre-delegation of launch authority. You tell people in the field, if you lose communication with me, if you detect a nuclear detonation on Moscow or near Moscow, you are now free to launch your forces under your own control. You don't need leadership to say go ahead or not. This is in effect the doomsday machine. We have created a situation with Russia. And I'm saying we, because we could have corrected this. I've been working on this for 20 years and being laughed at for 20 years. We could have corrected this. We have created a situation for Russia where they have had no choice but to build a doomsday machine. And let's hope they never have to use it. So the timelines are extremely short. So let me go back to where I was, and then I'm just gonna make a couple of very quick additional remarks, and then I'll stop, because there's clearly not nearly enough time to do what needs to be done. This just shows you examples of what are called orbits that are used by both the United States and Russia for satellites that are looking at the Earth for warning of nuclear attack. Both Russia and the United States have launched constellations of satellites in what's called geosynchronous orbit. A geosynchronous orbit is just simply an orbit that's high enough in altitude that it rotates around the Earth once in a day, once every 24 hours. So as the Earth rotates below, it appears to always be over the same location of the Earth. That's why geosynchronous is used for communication satellites and all kinds of things like that. The other kind of satellite orbit that's commonly used are satellite orbits that are called Molniya orbits, or Molniya orbits. It's a Russian name. These are orbits that take 12 hours. So they're called semi-synchronous orbits. And so every 24 hours, when you're up at the apogee, you're looking at the same location in the Earth. What we now know about, what we now know about Russia's satellite system is that they have not solved the problem of looking against the bright background of the Earth. Very hard to see things against reflections from the sun against the background of the Earth. A missile plume is very bright, but it's a dim object you're seeing. If you're looking into a square kilometer of space on the ground, the reflected light is tremendous, even relative to a missile plume. So you have to be able to distinguish that there's a missile plume against the background relative to the background. The Russians have not solved this problem. So they have they used to have 9 satellites in orbit. Each one would replace for about 2.5 hours the one before it, and looking down at the Earth. So the idea would be they look for the missile against the black background of space. So now, when they try to do this from geosynchronous orbit, what they have is a satellite system that this is the system we discovered, and incidentally, our intelligence community was not aware of this. This was a discovery made at MIT analyzing publicly available data. When I went to the Pentagon with this, I went to both the Russians. I went to both the Russians and the Americans. I want to be clear about this. I went to Russia to give it. I wasn't sure I was going to be arrested, because this has got to have been one of the big secrets that Russia had. But I went to Russia to talk to the Russians about it, and to the American Pentagon to try to get some cooperative effort going. Russians were interested, but the United States wasn't interested. Anyway, the Russians were going to build a constellation, they called it Prognos, where their satellites would look tangentially at different regions of the Earth. Let me just pull this up here. And you can see they can see certain circular areas of the Earth's surface if they're only looking against the dark background of space. So the Prognos locations are exact. So Prognos 4 was looking at Europe. We know that during the crisis over the Pershings being inserted into Europe, they actually placed a satellite into the Prognos 4 position. They were so worried about Pershing. There were satellites in the Prognos 2 and 3 position were for China, Western and Eastern China. So if we go back, you can see here's Prognos 1, the middle of the United States, ICBM fields, Prognos 4, Europe, Prognos 2 and 3, China. Right now, the Russians have given up on this satellite system. They have not been able to get it to work reliably. Not only is this true because we have records of satellite launches, so we know what satellites are in orbit, but I happen to also know from direct conversations with very high-level people in Russia, who I consider friends, and I think they consider me a friend because they shared this kind of information with me, that Russia just has not been able to solve this problem. So basically, they can't see a short warning, I would call it a short warning attack from the most potent threat they face, the Trident submarine launched ballistic missiles. This is a very dangerous situation. So I'll stop here simply because I've taken so much time, but I'm happy to answer questions. I can put up, in fact, what I'll do is I'll put up a page where you can see a whole bunch of things. If something catches your interest, just let me know and I'll talk to it.
All right, Ted.
Is that helpful?
Yes, a lot of information to take in there. Well, I think that when I heard you speak the other day, you raised some of this concern in the context of the current war in Ukraine.
Yes.
And could you elaborate a little bit more on that in the context of the Ukraine war?
Well, we have no idea how such an exchange could begin. I want to be clear. I have more to say, but just to be clear, it could be from anywhere. For example, we have submarines at sea, and I know for a fact, and we know for a fact, in fact, the Russians know for a fact, that our submarines are trying to engage their submarines. We just had an incident a few weeks ago where a Virginia-class attack submarine was caught by a group of Russian ships exercising near the Sea of Okhotsk, and they chased this submarine out of the area. So there are other incidents we know about. So you could have had a collision. Someone could have dropped a real depth charge on the submarine and sunk it. Anything could happen. But for the current situation, a guess, which could be completely off, is that the Russian doctrine is, I should say, Russian nuclear doctrine, part of which was worked on we know was worked on by Vladimir Putin in 2010. So we know he was involved in this. This is a matter of open knowledge. Is the Russians were trying to understand how, for their situation, nuclear weapons, what their nuclear doctrine should look like. They are highly aware of their limited, their conventional forces being less than capable against Western conventional military forces. We are seeing that in the Ukraine now. It's clear what the Russians were hoping to do was a German style blitzkrieg, and like Germany did to France and Belgium in World War II. And they just didn't pull it off, couldn't pull it off. And if it were a Western force, I think it would be more likely they could have pulled this off. I don't know they would have, because they badly misjudged the willingness of Ukrainians to fight. And they badly misjudged the effectiveness of very modern homing anti-armor weapons, not to mention anti-aircraft weapons. Both of those were bad misjudgments, along with their inability to provide appropriate logistics for a fast-moving armored attack. All of that having been said, they have now demonstrated that they do not have an army that's close to up to what Western conventional military capabilities are. Now, Russian military nuclear doctrine.
To maybe end your slideshow so that I can see the other participants.
I'm sorry?
Could you end your slideshow there?
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, stop sharing. So
Yeah,
then
I'll stop sharing.
I'll be able to
How's
see
that?
everybody. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So if you take doctrine as a guide to what could lead to an uncontrolled escalation, the doctrine of Russia is that if the leadership reaches a conclusion that the core security and survival of the Russian state is at risk, they can escalate to de-escalate, is their terminology. Someone.
Yeah, I'll mute that. I think that's Sally Alice. I can mute you, Sally.
So the language they use, which I regard as very dangerous, is the language is to escalate to de-escalate. Well, you escalate by using nuclear weapons or a nuclear weapon, and then you de-escalate by letting the other guy see that it's very limited.
I'm here.
And
Okay. Sorry, Ted. You got muted accidentally there. Could you unmute yourself? Do I have to do it? You're muted, Ted. Everybody's muted but me. Looks like.
how's now? You can hear me now? Hello?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, all right. So the language that the Russians use, which I'm repeating it because I find it disturbing. The language is escalate to de-escalate. That's the language. In other words, you escalate by using a nuclear weapon or several, small yield. Of course, we would have no idea what the yield of the weapons were. All we would know it's a nuclear weapon. And then you stop and you expect the other side to pull up short and not use nuclear weapons in response. Well, it could work, but it's a big bet. I mean, I wouldn't want to bet the future of the world on that kind of doctrine. And again, I remind you, how much did we know, we being the leadership of the US, when some planes ran into the World Trade Center? We had no idea what was going on. You think if a couple of nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine or in adjacent countries, we would immediately say, oh, that's what the Russians mean. They're very small. They're trying to just get our attention, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not realistic. The level of information that people can get in a short timeline, and more importantly, collect and get and sort through, is near zero for the kind of decision-making that would be required if something like that happened. So anyway, I'll take questions. Ed Mace?
I see that Helen Caldecott has joined us.
Oh,
Welcome, Helen.
hi, Helen.
You're a hero to all of us for your.
Helen knows me as a war criminal from long back.
So I wanted to invite Helen if she wants to ask the first question or make a comment.
Fine, fine. Helen, is it? You're muted.
You're muted.
Helen, you're muted.
There you go.
What about Ted?
now you're-
What
you're-
about the dead hand?
Well, you effectively know, I mean, a lot of people have been claiming to know about the dead hand system. I honestly, the more I hear, the less I believe I know, but there is no doubt.
I know the guy who invented it in Russia.
Well,
He was my friend, but he's dead.
What's that? What's a dead hand?
Valery Yarinich?
Yes.
Yeah, Valery, yeah.
Yaranich.
Yeah,
What is it?
we have it's a system that people refer to as the dead hands system. That is to say, it guarantees the launch of nuclear forces if the leadership is no longer in a position to make a decision whether or not to launch. And what I would say, regardless of the details of how it's implemented, we have a dead hand system in Russia. As you may not have been on when I was talking earlier, but the Russians have to pre-delegate launch authority in a wide variety of ways. Exactly what they do, I have no idea, but I can tell you, we did similar things in the US. You know, where you say, oh, for example, we used to have, you probably remember this aircraft called Looking Glass, which used to be always flying over our ICBM fields.
Yeah.
Under certain conditions, the commander of Looking Glass, which was a one-star Air Force general, could launch all of the ICBMs against Russia. And that condition had to do with loss of communication, belief that we were already under attack, things like that. So there were very closely guarded secrets about what exactly would release him for this decision. But we did it. And you could do it to submarines at sea if you chose. You could say, if you lose communication with the United States for, X amount of time, and you can't reestablish communication for Y amount of time, you are free to launch your forces. Or we can just we can send a message out to submarines and say, if this communication stops, we're going to continue sending you baseball scores. And if all of a sudden you're not getting baseball scores, you are free to launch. And there is very little doubt that the Russians have already made such arrangements. The exact details are irrelevant. What the relevant point is that the dead hand system is already in place. We have a dead hand system in Russia. This is not a good situation.
Okay.
Well, it's because America wants to win a nuclear war, so they take out Moscow and Putin, and then this automatic rocket leaves the Ural Mountains,
Yeah,
which
well,
launches all the weapons, right?
The rocket that you're talking about is only one of numerous measures. It's a rocket. Actually, it's similar to what we have. We have a system we used to call it ERCS. You have to excuse me. It's so crazy. You understand that. Emergency Rocket Communication System. It's exactly the kind of thing that we had. We would launch a rocket, and it may even be a rocket. It used to be on a Minuteman, but It may even be a rocket on a Trident. I mean, it makes sense to have a rocket on a Trident that would do that.
Do you think we're going to make it, Ted?
Well, if I could do a physics experiment about whether we would make it through the Cold War alive, I would say I would have guessed 99 out of 100 times we would have not made it, but we did make it. So I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful. You know, this is not a quantitative, there's no way to quantify the risk. The thing we do have on our side, which I believe has saved us so far, is that people in political decision-making positions are so afraid of nuclear weapons that when the idea even comes up, they just bury their, they just run away as fast as they can, including presidents.
Do you think Putin has lost the plot psychologically?
Well, I think he looks more stressed than I have seen him in the past. My view of Putin, and I want to make clear, I'm not talking about the man as a moral human being. I'm talking about as an intellect. Peter the Great was not such a good guy either, but Putin has shown up until now an extraordinary level of tactical and strategic thinking. He made an extraordinary mistake by going into Ukraine. I mean, I can't begin. I was sure, just to show you how much I know, I was sure he would not go into Ukraine. The reason was not because I think he's a nice person. I thought he was getting what he wanted. Everybody was upset. Everybody was debating about whether or not NATO and the United States and had the right policies. The French and the Germans were talking with the Ukrainians and Russians in the Normandy diplomatic discussions. The French and the Germans were already on record being against NATO expansion into Ukraine and Georgia. So I was looking at it and saying, this is hopeful. It's hopeful that enough diplomatic discussion will happen that he won't immediately get what he wants. But now people will realize that you can't just play third-rate psychologist and dismiss everything this man is saying, because that's what's been going on. Rather than listening to what he has to say and taking him seriously, which I have always done, but our political leadership has not. We've gotten ourselves into this situation. Now, I'm not trying to blame everything on the West. He made this terrible error, but we have a lot of blame here to take. Now, he has just said that nuclear weapons, don't rule out the possibility. I put my nuclear weapons on alert. He's already said that. That means all of the submarines have gone out to sea, all right, which incidentally happened a month ago. I was tracking this. The submarines went out to sea. All of the land mobile missiles have gone out from their sheds. That's already happened too. So you can be sure that all the tactical nuclear weapons have been moved to locations where they can be utilized if the command goes out. This is not a good situation. And all these people want to do is call his bluff. Well, maybe he's smart enough to know not to do this. I don't know.
Do you think Biden's up to it?
What?
Do you think
I don't
Biden is up to it?
Well, I think Biden has shown good judgment prior to this time. He looks like Biden is getting a little bit hysterical too.
Yeah.
I'm afraid Biden has shown good judgment. No fly zone. None. Right decision. No NATO countries directly involved. No. No offensive weapons. No. But now he's looking a little erratic now. And I can't tell you what's happening in the White House, but I can speculate based on detailed information from the past. He's got a bunch of 30-year-old guys, who are all geniuses. Some of them I've seen had to deal with, very unpleasant to talk to. They know everything. You know, I'm ignorant. They don't even know who I am. I'm ignorant. And they have no knowledge. They're only thinking politics. They have no knowledge of the military issues. They have never made a mistake in their life. And they know what needs to be done. And he's surrounded by these characters. And, you know, after a time, you're exhausted. Some of these guys begin to look like they may know what they're talking about. I hope he's resisting that, but I don't know.
Some people say Putin is on cortisone, steroids.
Yeah,
His
he
face
definitely
is
doesn't
moon
look well.
faced, and that can produce psychosis.
Yeah, he always, yeah.
Want to get a few other questions from a few other folks. Ed Mays from Pirate TV and Free Speech TV in Seattle is with us, and he's got his hand up. Go ahead, Ed, unmute yourself, please.
So I've been hearing about something that's very concerning, and I just wanted to, I think it's relevant, and I wanted to get your impression about it. And that is that shortly before Putin invaded, I heard that Zelensky announced that he was going to abrogate the agreement that he had with Russia, Ukraine has with Russia. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they took all the nuclear weapons out of Ukraine. And there was a commitment that Ukraine would not be a nuclear power. And that Zelensky said that he was thinking about rearming his nuclear missiles, which would be very easy for him because they have all the nuclear power plants over there and everything. And then I was trying to confirm that. And so I asked where they got that information, and it was a link to RTTV. And so I tried to follow that link, and it's censored. I can't get to that link. So I asked them if there was any other confirmation of this. Have you guys heard about this?
There are no nuclear weapons in Ukraine. All of the Russian nuclear weapons that were in Ukraine when the Soviet Union broke up were moved back to Russia. All of them.
Yes, but he was saying that he was going to abrogate that agreement.
Well, it doesn't matter if he abrogates it. He's got nothing. I mean, it's
because Zelensky could very easily put nuclear warheads on his missiles.
He has no nuclear warheads.
But he could make them. He has nuclear power.
No, you need special nuclear materials. You need expertise. There's no doubt that if he had 10 years to do it, and international support, because he doesn't have the industrial base at this point, he could do it. But he doesn't have it now. There's no prospect of Ukraine having nuclear weapons against Russia at this time. Zero.
John Walsh, do you have a question? Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, John. Could you unmute yourself, John? Should be
I'll
the
shoot.
There we go. There we
you
go.
go.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. This is going to be a question that doesn't relate specifically to Ukraine, because I think your discussion was a more general one and really very informative, at least for me. Given all this, and here I was inspired by what William Perry said at a forum here a couple of years ago. Shouldn't we do as the very first thing, get rid of hair trigger alert, launch on warning, and do it the way the Chinese have done by separating their warheads from their missiles, from their delivery systems? It just seems to me that if we don't do that, then we have these very short times for decision. And I don't understand actually why the anti-nuclear movement at this point doesn't put that at the top of its list, because we've had a real-time experience with it here now. But maybe there's a reason.
Yeah, well, I think you're on exactly the right track. I would be a little ahead of you on this. I think we should eliminate are land-based missiles, period. If there's no target to shoot at, you're not going to shoot at it. And the submarines are more capable. I want to underscore, if you believe you want to fight and win a nuclear war, which incidentally, I'm not suggesting, but if you're one of these guys who thinks that you can fight and win a nuclear war, the submarines are far more capable as strike weapons, far more. That's why it's so dangerous, because the Russians can't see these broad ocean areas because of the limitations on their satellite technology. But if you want to eliminate, there's no decision to make if there are no land-based ICBMs. The Russians have no decision to make. So I would.
But could I just follow up on that? It seems to me that in terms of accidental Armageddon here, in terms of an accidental launch, it seems to me that command and control over the submarines is even more chancy than it is to the land-based missiles. But even if not, do we really want to have put them in the situation where they have to make a fast decision or a decision at all when they're isolated?
You only need a fast decision if you believe you have to fight and win a nuclear war, because you need a fast decision because you have vulnerable forces and the enemy is going to destroy it. If you can say, look, you use those terrible weapons on my country and my people, I promise you, you and your people are going to die. And I don't have to do it tomorrow, next week. I have the ability to do it because I have survivable nuclear forces that can be brought to bear against you under a wide variety of conditions. So all this talk about the need for speed is generated by an underlying belief that you're going to fight and win a nuclear war. I don't give a damn if we lose every ICBM we have, as long as we didn't have fallout over the country killing millions of people. It doesn't matter to me at all. The Trident is going to do anything you could ever imagine. The problem with the Trident is that they can't see it coming early enough, and that could cause an accident, which is why I risked getting arrested in Russia to go talk to them about the shortfall I discovered. That was a very secret thing to them, and then went to the Pentagon and got laughed at when I talked to the United States about doing something about it. This is where I think Helen and I may have a small disagreement. See, I've never been a fan of de-alerting. And the reason I don't like de-alerting is because there's an incentive to try to re-alert in a crisis. And I don't want both sides trying to put warheads back on their missiles. And then, I think just take them away. Just eliminate them. Who needs them?
I agree.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
You
you
can
know,
testify on my behalf at my war crimes trial.
I'm wondering if Marjorie Cohn or Ellen Barfield have a question or comment they'd like to share.
John, did I ask you, did I satisfy you, John?
Well, in terms of rational decision making, I would agree with you.
Yeah, okay.
But in terms of an accident, I don't think it's wise to have any weapon, nuclear weapon, capable of being launched by somebody out there by accident. I think there should be a long interval. Well, then you have to separate the warheads from you have to do that for all of them, I think, unless you're not worried about accidents. Then I agree with you, but I'm worried about an accident.
Just so you understand my concern, the moment I got into this crazy business, my thoughts have always been aimed at accidents, because I never believed anybody rational would start using these. But that doesn't mean, rationality has nothing to do with it.
Right. So Marjorie, I heard you on another webinar. Was that today? I watched it today. You were with Medea Benjamin and Richard Falk. Of course, you were talking about legal issues.
Well, I'm listening to
International
Ted
law.
Postol about nuclear war. Can you ring me back in about 15 minutes? No. What?
Okay. Helen, did you mute yourself? Okay. Helen's muted. Marjorie, I'm sorry. Did you have anything you would like to say to share with us, Marjorie?
No, I'm just here to learn, and I am updating an article that I wrote about Veterans for Peace Nuclear Posture Review, which I think is really an important document. And I hope we get it out widely, even more widely than we already have, in anticipation of Biden's nuclear posture review, especially now. But I really appreciate Ted Postol's comments. I interviewed Ted a couple of years ago. And I've just learned so much from him. So I'm just here to learn, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. And we definitely want to take this teachable moment to give higher visibility and more wider distribution to our nuclear posture review. And that's on our agenda for this meeting and for the next meeting 2 weeks from now. So thank you for mentioning that. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Ellen Barfield, but if you had anything to say, you're welcome. And what's going on here?
Ellen Thomas, I don't have anything, but she might.
Okay. Ellen is okay. I think Helen Caldecott is sharing her screen probably by accident. And maybe I don't know how to undo that screen sharing.
Maybe you can change the screen sharing options to,
This is what I'm attempting. My first time hosting. This is fun.
Are you still host? Do you want to make me host and then I'll try to fiddle with it?
I'm still host, but sure, okay. I'll make you host, Ellen, since you're very good at this.
I don't see it anymore. It looks like it's gone.
Okay, it's gone now.
Yeah.
Okay, so where were we?
I think Robert Watt has a question.
Ellen passed the ball to Ellen. So Ellen Thomas, did you have any comments or questions?
I have a question about the Russian troops in Ukraine. It seems to me that, speaking to Veterans for Peace, it's logical to ask the question, do you think that there's any possibility of their rebelling against doing what they're doing in enough numbers that it might make a difference?
Are you asking me or?
I'm asking whomever.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
There'll probably be some individual acts of resistance, but not likely, but who knows? Who knows? I guess maybe that kind of moves us towards the discussion of what can we do about preventing an escalation of this war, which could lead to a possible nuclear war. What should, can this working group and Veterans for Peace and the U.S. peace movement and the international peace movement do at this time to encourage a prompt end to the violence in Ukraine? Any thoughts on that? I'll give Ted first shot at it since he's our guest speaker, but I would like to hear other ideas as well.
Well, you know, the question is what's practical? I mean, at this point. And I don't have an answer to that. There was apparently Naftali Bennett, you know, the Prime Minister of Israel, went to sound out Putin. He was in Moscow. Maybe it was last week. There's an article in the Jerusalem Post, if you guys want a copy of it. It was not repeated anywhere that I could see, so I have no idea what it means. But he was sounding out Putin to find out what he would require to stop this terrible thing that's now going on. And quite frankly, from my point of view, it was not totally unreasonable, but I don't, I'm not one of the geniuses in the American administration, or for that matter in Russia. But the idea was simply that Zelensky agree not to become a member of NATO, not to seek NATO membership, which frankly is a giveaway for nothing, because he can't qualify. NATO requires, because of Article 5, it requires all kinds of things of new members, because you don't want to get, you don't want to take on a country that's got all this internal domestic problems. There are all kinds of reasons why Ukraine in the foreseeable future could not be part of this. Now, apparently he also asked the question, Bennett also asked the question of Putin, and incidentally, there was no clear answer whether how Putin reacted to this. Was that NATO, that Ukraine limit its military capability, which I think sounds like a no starter, but I wouldn't do it if I were Ukraine. However, there are things you could do that I think would be palatable, even to me if I were in Ukraine, because I don't want to be subject to constant threats from Russia. Mm-hmm. So, but if you limited my military to extremely capable defensive weapons, all weapons, no weapon is defensive. If you guys are soldiers, you know that. But these anti-armor weapons, these man-portable anti-armor weapons, they are really doing a lot of damage to the Russians. The drones that can attack columns of armored vehicles are doing a lot of damage. The surface-to-air, the man-portable, the man-launched surface-to-air missiles have gotten very good. They now can image their targets. So the infrared, this is a discussion, and the technology for these missiles has advanced. It's like a computer game. Anytime you look on your iPhone or your Android phone at images of people and you see the little boxes go up over their faces, shows you what the artificial intelligence is capable of doing in terms of designating and following a target. That's not hard to put, given modern technology. It's not hard to put on a man-launched missile. And, this is the kind of stuff that allows people, some of the statements are they've shot down 30 fixed-wing aircraft. I don't know if it's true, but it's possible. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to use fixed-wing aircraft to attack ground targets, they're low. Mm-hmm. And if you're low, you're subject to, when I was working with the Navy, all these ground attack pilots I used to know, is they would have arguments with the air superiority pilots. They'd say, when I shoot at a target, people are shooting back at me. And, you really can shoot back at people when you have these man-launched vehicles, even a fixed-wing aircraft. So if you allowed Ukraine to have that kind of weaponry, which could be used as part of an offensive capability, but doesn't have to be, then I think you could, then they would be demilitarized in the language of Putin, at least as far as I can see. I don't know what's possible. The no starter I heard that was in this most recently was that they should not become part of the EU, and I think that's beyond what they should, what he should demand of them. Finland is part of the EU. It trades very efficiently with Russia and with the EU. It is a neutral, non-aligned power, and the Russians have been happy to tolerate it on their border. The problem is that the West has instilled in the Ukrainian vision, in Ukraine's vision, although it's Ukraine's fault too, people of Ukraine, that they are somehow going to be a bulwark against Russia. That's wrong. That's not the thing to have done. And in effect, what we are now doing is we are making Ukraine a NATO power by dumping all of these weapons into Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be part of NATO if they have all the weapons that we want to give them. Right. And I think this is the wrong thing because that's the concern that Putin has. And he's not alone in that concern. He may be willing to do much worse than anybody else is willing to do. But so
Robert
Yes.
Watt, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
I'm sorry. Okay.
If you unmute yourself, go ahead and.
I will. This is my first opportunity to meet with this group. I joined the Veterans for Peace about a month ago, and I did it because I was able to spearhead the Rhode Island legislature, both in the Senate and in the House, to introduce resolutions calling on the federal government to sign, if not ratify, the TPNW. And you know that we have submarine building capabilities here in Rhode Island. We've had a lot of experience with nuclear activities. We have Raytheon over here. So we have a bunch of profiteering, warmongering elements within Little Rhode Island. The reason I signed on today is because this past Tuesday, they called a spur of the moment first hearing in the House of Representatives relating to the resolution. And I might just say that the resolution is really a copycat, cut and paste of resolutions that have already passed Oregon, California, Maine, and New Jersey. But we have Jack Reed here, the head of the Armed Services Committee and a longtime player in these issues. And we've been, on behalf of Pax Christi, on behalf of the Quakers, both groups of which I'm a member of, we've been pressuring White House, Reed, Cicilline, and Langevin to at least get one of them to sign the ICANN pledge for about a year. We had no bite at that worm. No fish has been landed in our boat, but we've got an activated peace groups here in Rhode Island with over 10 people testifying on Tuesday, over 35 pieces of written testimony with a lot more detail than I'm going to speak about here. So I'm going to put my name in the chat because it's very possible that we're going to have hearings quickly coming up before the Senate of the House of Rhode Island's Congress. And then we're going to try to convince the leadership to pass this resolution. And so I can see that the Veterans for Peace could be a crucial component to that, but I can't find them here in Rhode Island. I can't reach out to them in Massachusetts. It's like I've got the Berlin Wall of communication on a very important issue that may be generative of a partial resolution to the doomsday scenario, which I learn more every time I listen to any of you. So I'd like to just leave it at that. I'll put in the chat my email address, and if anybody could follow up with me at some point, I won't take up more time of this group here today, and I'll try to join you in 2 weeks as well.
Great, Robert. Well, that's some very important work you're doing. And that's one of our priorities as well, is to promote the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and to get it passed at the city resolutions as well as state and other bodies. I hope we can find some Veterans for Peace in Rhode Island for you. I think I'm not sure if we have a chapter there. I imagine we do.
There is no chapter.
No chapter there. Maybe there are probably some individual members we can find through the national office. I'll help you with that. Anybody else who wants to raise their hand to support you in doing that, be great. But we'll make sure we get you some support from Veterans for Peace one way or another. Dan Yassin, I see you put your email in the chat. Thank you. Where are you, Dan, and what do you have to say?
I am in Fresno, California.
That's right.
My group is Peace Fresno, and I do a radio show monthly, Speaking Truth to Empire. I think I've interviewed Marjorie Cohen, and we have had her come to Fresno on her book tour. So I was glad because I'm on the global network email, get lots of email from Alice Slater, and I got this this afternoon, the link, and I'm interested because Peace Fresno, we are putting together a panel of speaker to do a Zoom meeting early April. So I would love to have probably even Ted Postol or John Walsh on that panel. So just 3 people and do that. So I'll try to contact other people. Yeah.
That's great. Well, there's a lot of good activists in Fresno. In fact, one of our Veterans for Peace National Board members, Joshua Shirley, is sure you know
Yes.
Joshua.
Yeah, I know him very well. I've known him since he moved to Fresno, and he got connected with us on the board, Center for Nonviolence and Peace Fresno. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Aware of it very well.
Kelly Wadsworth, I don't know if we've seen you on previous calls. Where are you?
I'm in Salem, Oregon, and I just moved here from Seattle, Washington, where I was a VFP Chapter 92 member, and just starting to get linked up with my local Oregon chapters. And I'm not an expert in any capacity, so I'm representing like the lay contingency of folks who know it's a problem, know it needs addressing and activism. And so I'm here to continue to learn more about how to be most effective in this space.
Great. And are you a veteran, Kelly?
Yes. I'm an Iraq War veteran. I served 01 to 11, deployed in 08 to 09.
Okay. We've got a lot of good VFP members in Oregon. So
definitely.
Yeah. Great. Well, anybody else have questions or comments here? Further question or discussion with Ted? If not, I want to thank you.
I do have a comment
Go
now.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Question also.
Just that my anti-nuclear weapons activism goes back 35 years. So I experienced the huge outpouring of anti-nuclear sentiment and activism back in the 80s. And we're going through some really scary, horrible times, but I hope it will re-energize huge anti-nuclear energy. That's the only way we'll ever get it finally taken care of, finally abolish the damn things.
Really?
So,
well, it certainly is one of those moments that what they say focuses people's minds. And, you know, it's not just the question of the heightened threat of nuclear war, but there's also the serious concerns about the nuclear power plants in Ukraine. And speaking of which, today is the anniversary of Fukushima disaster. This is a lot of education. Of course, this group formed primarily to be a vehicle for educating people and mobilizing people. So we have to kind of kick into higher gear now. I think we've had such a good discussion today that I'm not going to try to drag this meeting out through other agenda items. We've actually touched upon about everything we wanted to talk about.
Could I ask one final question?
Oh, yeah, please, Kelly.
This might just be a very basic kind of question, but it sounds like a lot when we talk about kind of nuclear weapons and posturing, you know, a lot of it assumes like that the actors are rational or that there's a strategic plan. And I am in the camp that think Putin's lost the plot a little bit, and that it looks to me like there's some let's just burn the house down behavior happening. What kind of postures, like, I mean, is that a different conversation? Like if strategic goals aren't really part of the interest of the parties at the table?
That is a big a whole nother discussion, I suspect. Does anybody want to try to briefly respond to that? Because I don't think there's a brief.
I'm not, were you
longer
asking,
discussion. Go
were
ahead.
you
Ted.
asking, I need clarification. Were you asking about the underlying assumption that we're dealing with rational actors? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think
is
my
that the
question in this particular scenario, I think, at least to me, sometimes it looks like Putin
Well,
strategic plans, but other times it looks like the goal is just to burn the house down. And that there
I
aren't.
think my own view, based on a lot of things I've seen from the inside, is that most people have no idea what they're doing. They're just trying to do the best job they can within the constraints they think they're living with. You know, it's it's not that maybe people do evil because they don't understand what they're doing, but they don't necessarily intend to do evil. So I have not seen what I consider evidence that someone would knowingly try to make matters worse. The problem is they can have ego and ignorance and arrogance that is far more dangerous in some ways than someone who knowingly does something evil. I had a joke. It just drove all the political scientists I work with crazy, because I was at Stanford and they're all into this. They have what, when someone says IR to me, I'm a physicist, I think infrared. When they say IR, they mean international relations. And there's a big elaborate theories they have. And one of the areas that they're constantly working on is they have this thing called the prisoner's dilemma. It's a game, that has to do with all the dilemmas of the prison. And my response to it was always, if there are no prisoners, there are no dilemmas. That's what I would say to them, because who's to say that the rules that you set are going to be followed by anybody else, that they're going to even agree to the same rules? You can't think of a rule-based logical world. Most mistakes, Putin is very well thought out. He's dangerous. He'd murder you without a second thought. It's all those things that people say, but he is very well thought out. And I don't think he had a clue of what a bad decision he was making by going into Ukraine. And now he realizes it, but he's not going to back down because he has other objective he's trying to achieve against this horrifying mistake he made, and his complete unwillingness to take the consequences.
Yeah.
Anyway,
if in fact Putin was willing to take the risk of possibly burning the house down, how did he get into that position? I think it's really important for us to take a hard look at how the U.S. and NATO put him in a virtually impossible position, and he made a really desperate move as a result of that. Not a good move, not one that we should justify, but one that we need to understand and take more responsibility for the role of our own government in creating this situation and exacerbating it. Even now, it seems to me that the U.S. and NATO could probably bring this war to a screeching halt by making a few simple and reasonable concessions that they've been unwilling to make to date. Unwilling to say
no, I agree.
and to put in writing that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO. Unwilling to stop positioning a U.S. missile systems close to Russia's borders. Unwilling to do anything to make Putin and Russia feel more secure as U.S. and NATO further surround them and encroach them and further express hostility. So I think it's really important for us to, Marjorie Cohn left the call right a few minutes ago, but she did a really good job of explaining that on another recent webinar. So I think it's important for us to take those things into account. The coordinating committee, those of us who meet once in a while before these meetings to prepare the agenda and whatnot, we had a little bit of online discussion about putting together another statement from this working group, expressing our concern about the threat of nuclear war coming out of Ukraine and pushing for a ceasefire, a de-escalation and negotiation to end this war as soon as possible before it gets out of control. So we're going to be working on such a statement. Any of you who want to participate are welcome to do so over the next few days, and then we'll share it with the entire working group. It's interesting that the another working group, the Veterans for Peace Climate Crisis and Militarism Working Group, wrote a statement about the crisis in Ukraine, and that was incorporated into the VFP kind of rambling, well, not rambling, but conglomerate statement that was they published on the VFP News this week. And Susan Schnall, our new VFP board president, said that they're going to rely more on statements from chapters and working groups and less trying to speak for national VFP, to speak on behalf of the wide variety of opinion within our organization. So at any rate, therefore, a statement, a good, strong statement that focuses on the nuclear danger coming from this working group might go far and wide. So I think it would be a useful first step for us to do as we consider other actions. We'll be meeting again in 2 weeks, and we'll come into that meeting with some ideas for further distributing and highlighting our nuclear posture review. And I think it's a good chance. I recommend that all of us go back and revisit that nuclear posture review, and particularly look at the section on Russia, which kind of explains a lot about how we got into the situation, not particularly with Ukraine, but otherwise how the U.S. has missed a whole lot of opportunities for meeting Russia halfway in terms of moving towards nuclear disarmament. Would you agree with that, Ted, that there's been a lot of missed opportunities?
I have to say I've been sick over this, most recently, but I have to tell you, I've been angry about this since at least 1990. I have a series of letters I wrote to the US government about incursions, submarine incursions of US submarines while the Russians were eliminating submarine launched ballistic missiles according to START regulations. And we had Los Angeles class submarines in the coastal waters of Russia. I wrote letters to the Pentagon. I wrote letters to the State Department. A friend of mine, Jim Goodby, who's the ambassador who negotiated the Confidence and Security Building Measures Agreement in Europe, he co-signed the letters. You couldn't get anybody. We were at the Russians right from the time they collapsed. This thing has been going on for 30 years, not 20. Mm-hmm. And I'm just angry because it didn't have to turn out this way. So you got the wrong guy if you think I'm going to say no. I'm really angry.
Right. Well, Harvey, did you have a word to share before we go?
Yeah. I just think there's just been so much focus on Putin and trying to decide how crazy he is, and not looking at what is our responsibility in terms of action. And I feel like, in my mind, and I've been contacting my Senator Lindsey Graham, try to get him not to threaten to assassinate Putin. But I've been in touch with as many people as I know to just say, we're just sitting back watching Ukraine and Russia try to get together and work out something. We're supposed to be the leader of the so-called free world. Why aren't we taking a leadership position and finding a diplomatic way to get off this train wreck that's in the process? And I'm so concerned about all these sanctions. I think if their military doctrine is based on risk of the core security of their country to survive, we're getting close to threatening that with all these sanctions. So I think, to me, we need to be pursuing diplomacy the president needs to be in communication with Putin. He shouldn't be taking trips to wherever he's going, Fort Worth or whatever. I mean, he's not even on task here. And we need a full bore diplomatic effort to really do some real hard negotiation and understand that, the legitimate security concerns of Russia have been ignored since they became Russia, essentially. And that's our best hope. I don't think we can just sit back and just wait to see what happens. I read these columnists in the Times and all these comments on their things, and the word diplomacy rarely even shows up in the comments. It's like we've lost the sense that that's really the only reasonable solution to this situation right now.
Well said, Harvey. I want to give
What I tell people is we need to pursue diplomacy as if our lives depended on it, because they do.
I want to give the last words to Ted and thank him again very much for coming and sharing with us on such short notice. It's really enlightening and helpful. And do you got any final words, Ted?
It's my privilege. It's my privilege. I'm pleased that I could be of any help at all. Thank you.
You mentioned to me yesterday, you have a webinar coming up next Thursday. You want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, next Thursday, I'm a member of this group called the Committee for the Republic. We had a meeting last week. I think it was Thursday. You can look it up. If you look for Committee for the Republic, Mearsheimer and McGovern. And we had both John Mearsheimer and Ray McGovern, veterans, I think, for intelligence veterans for peace, and Susan Eisenhower participated. I made a couple of remarks, and I think the question and answer period was very, very good. And John Mearsheimer is exceptionally good at what he does.
But so you're going to have another webinar with the same folks next Thursday, you say?
Yeah, the webinar we're going to have this Thursday is it's going to be me talking about elaborating on what I had said earlier, which is the dangers. Hopefully, it'll be more cohesive than what I gave you, and then Joe Cirincione, who works with the Quincy Institute. He's first class, and Cynthia Lazaroff, who's a filmmaker who's really knowledgeable about the subject too, and she's really capable. So there'll be three of us on this, talking about from different professional perspectives how this problem has come about and how and why it needs to be addressed immediately.
Great. Well, Ellen Thomas has just put Committee of the Republic website in the link in the chat, and so we can go there and find the details for that Thursday webinar.
I don't see it on the page there.
It's not yet put up. It'll be up in probably Monday.
The
announcement.
link, the announcement. Okay.
But the Mearsheimer should be there.
Yes, I just put the link to that in the chat.
And
all right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today, for sticking around this long. It's been a very important discussion. The more we can learn and the more we can figure out what to do to avoid a nuclear war, and the better. So we'll keep working at it. We've recorded this discussion and Ted's presentation, so we'll share that with the Veterans for Peace members and others who are interested in the coming days, and we'll get to work on a statement from the working group and prepare for a good, solid organizing meeting 2 weeks from today. Thank you all for being here. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your allowing me to speak.
Thank you for speaking.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.